Hi everyone, welcome to this special Zoom meeting with the All Blacks management today, and thank you for sending in your questions for the panel. I'm Warren Barclay, Managing Director of Experience Group and All Blacks Hospitality. We've been in the corporate hospitality sector for 20 years now. We take great pride in developing client entertainment solutions for you, our customers, whether it's a sporting occasion, a concert or a unique one-off event, either here or offshore, we deliver end-to-end solutions for you. One of the many contracts Experience Group has is with New Zealand Rugby around All Blacks hospitality. We've been doing this since 2000, where we undertook hospitality for the first Sevens tournament in Wellington at a brand new Westpac Stadium. And later that year undertook the Bledisloe Cup hospitality for the very first time. That was the game where John Eales kicked the last minute penalty to win the match. Can you believe that was over 20 years ago? What we're doing today is an attempt to keep you informed during these unprecedented times. We are, like you, stuck in lockdown and trying to eliminate the COVID-19 virus by staying at home and away from all contact. The better we do now, the better the chance of getting this done, and the sooner we are back to playing sport. So without further ado, we're delighted to be joined by three members of All Blacks management team today. Firstly, we have Joe Locke, who joined the All Blacks in 2008 after 6 years as New Zealand Rugby's media manager and oversees all media management and public relations for the team. Previously, he worked in a public relations role with the TAB and had a decade-long career in the media, including with Radio New Zealand, News Talk TV, and the Evening Post newspaper in Wellington, as well as in numerous magazines in the UK. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
Secondly, we have Pete Gallagher, who is currently the All Blacks physiotherapist and rehabilitation manager, a role he has held since 2005 and nearly 200 test matches. A proud Dunedin man, he has a diploma in physiotherapy from Otago, postgrad certificate in physiotherapy acupuncture, and a master's in health science, also from Otago. So welcome, Pete.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
And lastly, we have Greg Feek, a former All Black who played 10 tests between 1999 and 2001 as a prop. He played provincial rugby for Taranaki between 96 and 98 and Canterbury between 95 between 1999 and 2005, and has 63 caps for the Crusaders. He also played for New Zealand Māori in 2006. In 2008, he was the forwards coach for the Hurricanes. He then joined Leicester as scrum coach for the 2010-11 season. He worked as Ireland's scrum coach up until as recently as last year's Rugby World Cup, and is now the newly appointed forwards coach for the All Blacks. Welcome, Greg.
That's a great record for you, Greg.
Wow.
So firstly, thanks for giving up your time for us today, guys. It's very much appreciated. Let's get started. First question is for you, Greg. It's from Mike Olds, General Manager, Resine Construction Systems. As a junior rugby coach, 12th grade, Greg, at the international level of the game, what are the consistent focus points for the players? Firstly, at trainings, and secondly, pre-match. I'm not thinking about different plays, more about key things that are consistently applied weekly and never compromised, irrespective of the team you're coming up against.
I think most teams nowadays, time is precious. So you did right. It's concentrating on things that are most important and what will affect your game the most. So obviously, skill sets come into that. That's worked on every training right up until the game. So that's your catch, pass, kick, set piece stuff. Always honing that. And then, parts of the team runs will be all about trying to find go forward, trying to find space, and running training in that way. Guys learning how to use those skill sets in that facet. So how do we get go forward? Where's the space? And you can start to do that at high intensity as well. But they'll be the key things. So don't ever shy away from doing that. And in parts of those skill sets, when you look at, rugby is a game for all shapes and sizes. So have a look at who you have in your team and have those and hone those skill sets to suit some of those key players for you, i.e. getting go forward, or if you've got a good kicker, finding space. Things like that, you can really start to incorporate a challenge for the boys and some real fun around how you train as well.
Right. From our old mate Andy Christian, Greg, Director of PACE Project Management, what was the game plan? It's actually a double question. What was the game plan for the Irish in their only home win over the All Blacks? And how was it like coaching a team playing against the All Blacks and beating them?
Well, firstly, it's great to see a familiar name that I haven't seen Andy for quite a few years. So hopefully get to see him in person at some stage, Andy. And I could tell a few stories about you, but I'll leave that for another time. I'm probably glad you're not asking me personally, to be fair. So yeah, obviously those moments in rugby, there's huge moments, and obviously working for the Irish team for as long as I did, and having the All Blacks come to Dublin and beating them, those are the sorts of things that get you excited in sport. Best team in the world is coming into your territory, but it's weird thinking about it now. Obviously, we're in this top and being a part of the group, but I think the key things for us, I remember clearly, was we had to get our set piece balls, because the All Blacks are very tough around that area when you're trying to win your own ball. So that was a big focus point. Again, a basic of the game. We also felt that we had to, the All Blacks' physicality and size and I suppose X factor and so many players, we had to make sure that mentally that we were physically there, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So that was all part of our focus for the week. Discipline was another factor that we felt, if we were physical but disciplined, because we'd been one of the most disciplined teams in the world, or in Six Nations anyway, for quite a few years. So that was something that we felt, if we get those two things right, and then control the game, control the possession on top of that, and if we're able to do that, then we could imprint our game and hopefully use some of our set piece strikes that were becoming a bit of a weapon for us to get the game. But I mean, the game, I suppose, turned its head on one play that fortunately was planned 40 metres out, and we got the line out in that position. So you'd remember that, where Jacob Stockdale kicked over the top. So, a lot of the planning, a lot of work that went into it, we're fortunate to get some opportunities to do it. So that was I suppose, a simplified version of what the game plan was, and that game plan probably suits a lot of teams, to be fair. And how was it? Yeah, I suppose it's like I said, it was special. I think for the group, kind of was weird, especially with being a Kiwi and all the rest of it. But I think you get into these jobs where it's super competitive. You put so much work into it with everybody, and that sometimes just justifies a little bit of what you've been doing. But I also felt that I was away for a while, and I had a lot of family back here, and I suppose that in some ways I felt like it justified me being away with my family here. Like they were also almost going, okay, now I understand why you're away. Before that, they didn't get it, and I suppose that was from a personal point of view, it was satisfying to know that I wasn't away just because I didn't want to be here. I felt like there was a purpose to it, and there was something special about that group that we had.
Wow. Yeah. Peter, question for you from Marcella. What type of interaction have the coaches and staff had with the players to keep them active and focused during the lockdown?
Okay, well, there's lots going on. I mean, I guess as kind of the national team, we get to, we meet up each week online with all the strength and conditioning staff and also the physios from the Super Rugby clubs, really just to kind of support them in the sense that we don't really have the All Blacks in our hands at the moment, and they're not All Blacks because they're not selected. But we do have 250 rugby players playing professionally in this country at the moment that really just need us as a resource as basically they start to look at what they can move forward with. So if there's any blessing, it's the fact that probably there's better alignment amongst thinking and sharing of ideas within the New Zealand rugby community to try and work out, if you watch on Sky, obviously, what's it called, Joe?
Isolation Nation.
Isolation Nation. If you watch that and see what the players are up to, I don't watch it because maybe I should. But at the same time, we know that the players have their space. Some of them have more equipment than others. They have programs led by Super Rugby clubs that basically have great connections. They have team Zoom meetings, all sorts of connections within their own clubs. And really, we're just on the outside, I guess. Like, I kind of think it's probably from an All Black perspective, it's good not to bug the player because like all of us, they're adjusting to the new environment they're working in. And so having the line messages with the club saying, hey, it's great what's going on. Some of the longer term rehab guys, Angus Tarvel, for example, working with Kev McCoy at the Chiefs as the physio there, knowing that he's, got the program in place. He's having online Zoom meetings with surgeons. So all those things are kind of happening, and we just make sure that we have telecoms or at least Zoom meetings once a week as a group, and we're using that space to probably share ideas and make sure as a country we keep moving forward as we await a restart of the game. I hope that answers that.
Awesome. Probably leads on to one from Dennis Bowes, Project Manager for Watson Hughes Limited. Is this break helping the players get the rest they need, or do you feel that it may make them more prone to injury when they return to play?
Yeah, look, it's definitely front of mind. So from a New Zealand rugby perspective, Mike Anthony, who's our high performance manager, is probably leading that kind of conversation at head office, and our strength and conditioning coaches with Nick Gill, the All Black coach, with all our guys out of Super Rugby are online together, trying to work out what a reintegration looks like and what progression in terms of training looks like. If you were to say, and Greg played a while and played lots of games, if you were to say, do they see this as a good mental break from the game? Maybe, probably. And it's like all of us, it's how you take the opportunity and what situation you find yourself in regards to even just, your living space. If you've got enough space to live in and train in, then, you might be a happy soul as long as the family are happy. From a kind of ongoing perspective in regards to the demands of the game, with, players switching between a number of teams through the year, their biggest challenge is really staying connected and mentally and physically healthy when they're required to play, whether it's in the All Black jersey or in their Super Rugby jersey or in their provincial jersey, or in another national team jersey, obviously, in terms of New Zealand Maori. So we kind of know that there'll be really great things come out of this. So I think it will probably help some of the players realign their thinking around even what they do when rugby's done. And so that's some of the commentary kind of coming out. Shit, there's more to life than this, or there's not the same certainty that we thought as all of us are doing the self-reflection. And even the three of us on the panel here are probably doing exactly the same thing in terms of maintaining a balanced outlook instead of kind of a privileged one as a professional rugby player in this country or part of a management team. So look, there'll be active debate around competitions for a long time. But obviously, without competitions, the game isn't surviving at the professional level. So we have to accept that there's some inconvenient facts around how many games the players will play. And the reactivation is really like, there's a whole group, a COVID-19 medical group, looking at what the levels, as we drop through each level based on what the government are kind of giving us guidelines, what the players are able to train with, if they're 2 meters apart, and they can start forming small groups, can they train together when we're allowed as a community or society to come out of our bubbles? What does contact look like and when can we do that? And so in terms of sport-specific training or work hardening, the reality is that until we have the opportunity to kind of put shoulders on shoulders, people are at risk because they're just not used to the contact. So, rule of thumb, and I'm sure there's the media people will be saying, and they hear it from somewhere, that maybe 3-week lead in and all the rest. And yes, that'll be debated, but actively debated amongst people like Greg, as coaches, and the medical staff and the players themselves about what readiness looks like. So it's a great algorithm because we don't know the answer to it. But effectively, we're in a pre-season to a degree in regards to the type of conditioning we can do, weight training, running, but no ball. And no collisions. So that's what you have to fill a gap with. So I can't give a definitive because there isn't one, but we can collectively through the rugby union and through all our great people in Super Rugby and in the national teams, we'll come up with an answer, and hopefully we won't see a spike in injury rates. We might just see a normal kind of start of season kind of exposure to injury, and maybe we'll get a spike. We don't know. I mean, if you follow Twitter, last comment, you know, there's all sorts of stuff out of the lockout, out of the NFL, and how many ACLs and Achilles tendon ruptures they had. Well, we're different because we're a community training together, whereas often they're individuals just doing their own thing. So we've still got a mothership, we've still got great guidance from the super clubs, and everything seems to be ticking over, and we're not seeing a spike in injuries as they train in isolation in terms of calves and hamstrings, which we might see if we had a whole increased volume of running. So sorry, maybe got a little bit further down the track than I needed to there, but yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. So for you, how's it been working with players in the media during these uncertain times?
It's been interesting. It's, you know, to Pete's point, it's a new normal now for us now. We've been in a month in lockdown. So the media themselves were deemed to be essential services, but they were having to then try and deal with a whole bunch of the talent or interview subjects that are locked up at home. So we've obviously seen just like this call, the proliferation of Zoom interviews, and they seem to be that seems to be the image of the lockdown, not just in New Zealand but all around the world, where academics and sports stars and everything else. So we obviously realised that the teams weren't assembled, but there was still a desire from the media, plus also a desire from the super clubs, which were assembled at the time, to keep themselves out there and keep the team's front of mind when it came to fans. Fans obviously were keen to see what the players were up to and what they were doing. So there's been a kind of a working group, I suppose, meeting every week. Super Rugby have media managers, media organisations. Sky, obviously, we mentioned Isolation Nation. That was one of the first. Once games disappeared off Sky, then there was a real need to still have content coming through for fans. If you couldn't get live rugby up, then what could we replace it with? They obviously had the breakdown still going their show, so we kind of made sure that all our guys were dialing into the breakdown. They've started to run classic matches, which are proving to be pretty popular. Just because I'd imagine that fans, you only watch a game once and then it's gone. That game that the Irish All Blacks game that Fiki was talking about, that if that gets replayed again, they'll get a big audience. Maybe from Irish fans based in New Zealand, Fiki, but you know what I mean? There's been some outstanding. I watched England, I think the last time they beat the All Blacks at Westpac Stadium, that was on the other night, and I hadn't seen that game since I was there live, obviously. So I think from a fan's point of view, it's been everyone's recognised that that the media and Sky still kind of have to do their job. So yeah, we've been working with Super Rugby clubs around setting up Zoom calls with players, and I'd imagine that if you watch the 6 o'clock news at night, then you'll see that there's still quite a bit of content or interviews coming out of rugby, but also alongside that, all the players have still got their own social media channels, and we can talk about this later, but social media is the new media. So the players themselves, the All Blacks hospitality rugby fans will be dialing into players' Instagram and their Facebook feeds as much as they are watching the news these days. So that's just the new norm. So, and our players have been incredibly busy in that space. We're dealing with young 20-something players primarily who have their finger on the pulse when it comes to social media. So they know how to work that space. They know what their fan base wants, and so they're doing daily stuff, which is cool. It's really interactive. It's kind of, they're laying down challenges. They're doing dancing. They're kind of giving an insight into their lives that you wouldn't necessarily see from traditional media, maybe. So yeah, they're keeping really busy, and yeah, the fans are still kind of, even though we don't have rugby at the moment, they're still engaging with our players.
Right. From your own perspective, what has been the biggest challenge you have had to work through as All Blacks media manager?
It would be easy to kind of like talk about issues, but the issues really look after themselves. As long as you kind of like enter into any major issue with kind of honesty and integrity and just behave in the right way when it comes to explaining anything to the New Zealand public, then it'll take care of itself. So I don't really kind of see any of the issues that I've dealt with over the years as the biggest challenge. The biggest kind of like challenge in the wider sense of the word has been this change in the media focus, from traditional media to social media. You wouldn't believe how much change there is, not just year on year, I suppose, but just week to week. There seems to be some new kind of social media platform or some kind of way that we are engaging with the public, and we're seeing the impact on traditional media as we speak, with the way that once upon a time, and I suppose when Fiki was playing rugby, there would have been half a dozen print reporters, 3 or 4 photographers, a few radio reporters, and then TV cameras turned out to a traditional style press conference, and that was the only way that that fans could get access or an insight into the team. It was filtered through traditional media, and then 6 o'clock news would come, and then you'd see. Whereas now it's with the explosion of social media, that's changed. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week. You can follow every single All Black on multiple platforms, and they are all giving an insight into their lives. And so, how we as a team, as an individual, deal with that transition from a structured, traditional type media environment to a individual player making their own decisions on how they want to portray themselves, what they want to say, what they've got to say, whether or not how they're using their platform, and some people will do it in different ways. If you're comfortable in that space, then you'll potentially be able to kind of pivot into a whole different place, whether it's working with sponsors or brands or whatever you want to do. If you're purely want to be just seen as a rugby player, and that's your strength and that's your identity, then you'll still have a huge audience for your gym workouts, for example, or you'll see a lot of our players posting what they do for their training plans, and they will have their own niche audience of rugby and fitness people who actually that's all they want to see. And so it's interesting just dealing with the kind of the way that our players are managing that space, but it would be foolish to think that that's not the future, because, and my comment earlier about how we've got a whole bunch of 20-something players who have grown up in the digital space, and the danger is that a whole bunch of mainly old 40 to 50-year-old old folks are then trying to tell them how to do what they do in that space, when really they are the ones telling us what the future looks like. But it's from a New Zealand Rugby and an All Blacks point of view, we've got 7.5 million total social media fans on all our platforms. That's a massive, massive audience. That's bigger than pretty much every media organisation in the country put together. So that just demonstrates how huge it's grown in my time in the job. Instagram is the biggest growth in our kind of like our digital platform. So that means that we now have to figure out what that looks like, so the visual picture of these little boxes and the branding and everything it comes into play. And I think, like I said earlier, the players that are able to kind of like capture that moment on those social media platforms are the ones who potentially can, to Pete's point, when rugby's over, can then pivot into a new role. You can see that those players that are more inclined to put themselves a little bit out there will potentially end up, working as rugby commentators or on a TV show or something. So they're kind of, the players themselves understand the power of their I hate the word, but the power of their personal brand. So it's an interesting time. That's been the biggest challenge and the most interesting change in my kind of media environment that I work with.
Wow. Greg, back to you. This one from Matthew Shaw, Director, Matthew Shaw Legal Limited. Greg, given you have recently returned from having coached extensively in the Northern Hemisphere, primarily with Ireland, what aspects of the Northern Hemisphere game, both from the forwards and a scrum wise, have you learned that you believe could be applied to enhance the All Blacks scrum and develop it further as we move through 2020 and beyond? So in summary, is there anything that the All Blacks scrum could be doing better, do you think?
well, without going into technical detail, but if you think of it, for me, you know, to understand how people do things, you've got to understand how they think. And, you know, so for me, I immersed myself in Northern Hemisphere rugby and got to know players, obviously in Ireland, but you start to get to know players outside of that, coaches. And, you know, then players go away, they do a Lions tour, come back, and there's information, a little bit of information shared around that. And you start building this picture as to, you know, sometimes there's only so much you can see when you're analysing teams. So it gives you insights as to, okay, not just, oh, they're doing that, but why are they doing that? And then you can come up with ways, I suppose, to either stop it or combat it. And so, for instance, like, you know, if you look at some of the premiership rugby teams, to get out of their 22, they'll just hook the ball to the back of the scrum and then wait until they can get a penalty and kick for touch, rather than have the pressure of having to play in their own 22 or 5-10 metres out from their line. And that's a big part of some teams over there. And sometimes how they get that penalty, you wouldn't necessarily say it's legal, but dominance isn't necessarily about being legal. It's just purely about going forward and putting I suppose, a perception to the referee that that's how it is. And so, you know, there's different aspects of that. Then that's why mauling becomes important, the scrum and maul, because, you know, they'll scrum for a penalty, go for a maul, and then they do a lot of that as well. And there's a big mindset around that, and there's also like a physical conditioning around that as well, and the feel of how that works. So, you know, to answer the question, I suppose, to give you a bit of insight into that, how can I bring that into the ABs and slowly, and part of that is, first of all, I suppose, seeing how that looks, chatting to coaches, players, and then going from there. So I do think when we don't take jobs to go in and just keep it where it was. I think every job that you go into, and every year, no matter who was in my job, if they were still there, if it was chronic, they'd be looking to improve it anyway. So that's the challenge, and that's the part why we do the job. It's exciting to have a job like that. How can I be innovative? How can I find the next building block to keep growing this? And those building blocks, I feel, at this level, and the All Blacks have shown it, those building blocks, they're infinity in terms of how high they can go. We're just got to try to find what that is.
One from Dennis Bowes, Project Manager for Watson Hughes Limited. Given the tackle and breakdown situation, how can this be cleaned up? And have there been moves to referee this better to focus on ball speed?
First of all, I apologise for the flag falling down. I'd really tried hard to get that up, but slowly it's just, I think it might have been Joe's talk. It got sorry, Dennis, no disrespect. Couldn't help myself. So the breakdown obviously is always pretty contentious. It's there's, you know, a lot of some people probably don't understand it as well, because there has been changes over the years, but end of the day, it's still, you know, one team's trying to keep the ball, one team's trying to get it back. It's a physical contest, and the referees do find it difficult to get it. They might position themselves somewhere, and they could be, their vision could be obscured as to what is actually happening in that moment, 2 moments that there's an infringement. And players are getting so good at either slowing the ball down or whatever, and those sorts of things that it is tricky. Ian Foster was actually in Europe just before the outbreak for COVID-19, and they were having a big discussion with World Rugby, with all the top coaches, international coaches around that Pacific area. What can we do to clean it up? And so there were some new things that were being chatted about. That Glenn Jackson, I think, former referee, Jacko Goodman, I think they had him as looking at some areas around that, probably some medical staff experts, and just trying to find some processes and some clear ways to try to help clean that up. And I suppose, you know, the tackle area, you know, is where they'll always look at first, to make sure that that's done properly. So I don't have any definitive answers for you at this stage, because it's pretty organic, the breakdown. There's always a few tweaks, and rugby is there's always got little tweaks and growths happening all over the place, and that's why we have to be, as coaches and management and even fans, to be a little bit dynamic and keep up with what's going on, because once you've got the understanding of what's being refereed and how they're doing it, you can kind of enjoy the rest of the spectacle.
Pete, for you, teams like Japan seem to be starting to change the profile of the ideal rugby player, shifting from large, imposing physical characteristics to nimble, agile and elusive. Could we see a change in the makeup of the All Blacks?
Maybe if the All Blacks lose to Japan, if we're honest. I think you can kind of broad brush trends in the game, but a lot of it comes down to analytics. So those type of conversations, you lean on coaches like Greg, who are telling us what is winning the game. The profile of the Irish prop, for example, my understanding, Greg, is that it's different from what we have in New Zealand. And whether that is deemed to be one of the reasons why we lost in Dublin or were challenged by smaller teams like the All Blacks, when you watch a lineup, we're still not very big. I don't know if that, if you stand on the side of the field, sing the national anthem, Joe and I are belting out our kind of versions of it, watching, and you look along and go, God, they're bigger than us. And it happens almost every time, playing Romania. I mean, Japan, I spent a wee bit of time there this year with Wayne Smith and Robbie Deans when Brodie and Sam were up there. They're not small humans. And the thing is that, you've obviously got Jamie and Brownie obviously did a great job at the tournament. And I just wonder sometimes if tournaments are different. We learned that in 07. It's talked about a lot. But I don't know if that then leads on to a change in how the game is then won as Japan become a tier 1 nation and play bigger teams more often, if it's just size that we're talking about. So I think, Japan had a great D. I mean, I don't know what the analytics the Irish had, because the All Blacks didn't get the opportunity to play Japan at the World Cup. But obviously Ireland had their challenges there. But whether it came down to, the great footwork of some of their outside backs, and to be honest, I don't think I can answer that. But I would pitch that at Greg, because I think maybe, Greg, you could give us like a coach's kind of insight into that, because I think, we're going to develop the humans we have to play this type of game we have, because we got monstered by England. Maybe we got monstered in the semi-final, for example. So our focus might be on physicality and size. I'm not sure. That comes down to what our coaches want. So, Greg, I don't know if you've got an answer to that, but...
Well, it is tricky. Playing Japan, they had players there that were former number 8s playing on the front row. They definitely looked at a fit, mobile, ball-carrying group all around the forwards, with tactical smarts around it. They certainly, and I think going forward, I think that's something that is, again, in terms of building the All Blacks, if you're talking about the All Blacks now, as I said before, it's exciting to say come into an All Black environment, and Plum and Brad Moore, three of us being new, and be excited about how do we improve, look at what the other teams do, look at the Japan situation, what they've done, the players they've got in. I'm pretty confident that we can build something really special here and keep continuing building the legacy. And look at those things and see how we do. And sometimes it may be just a little bit of a different focus. If it was, like you said, Pete, front rowers, how much time do they spend in that part of their game, whether it's footwork and agility with the ball and defensively, or set piece. And, we've been having those conversations, and be interesting, without giving too much away, it will be interesting to see where we go with that. And, everyone knows that Japan had fast, hard fields. It was going to be mobile. It was going to be fast. They do a tremendous job over there with looking after their fields and things like that. So, we'll just, I suppose it's just I suppose we'll just have to get excited and wait and see how that transforms, Peter.
Yeah, great.
Pete, this is from Dimitri, CEO, CIS Flight Support, and it's 3 parts. It might be 3 questions. What is the minimum required time frame to bring AB players to the proper physical shape after a prolonged lack of the appropriate training? 2, how do they stay in shape nowadays? Does AB management team monitor the players at the moment? And 3, how long and what will it take for rugby players to get back into shape after the games are allowed to proceed?
I guess, we can do as much physical conditioning as you like, and even mental conditioning in terms of, staying connected, being well programmed, having conversations with coaches, even when you're in a lockdown situation. But match fitness is different, Greg would attest to as a player. So how we monitor players all year in our roles, like Gilly and I, for example, always in touch with say at S&C, always in touch with all the Super Rugby franchises on a weekly basis, to basically look at the list of players coaches like Greg are interested in, just say how they're travelling, are there challenges, can we help you out? So specific programming outside of knowing the older athlete better or the All Black who's played longer, you may have more engagement with that player if they just want to, have a conversation. There's a lot of trust involved in New Zealand rugby, and often we just know that if they have good relationships with their clubs, then we're not going to hear a lot from them, but we're still going to influence maybe where they shift their game based on performance-led conversations from our coaching staff. So if Greg, for example, said, hey, look, I've noticed on the stats coming through that one of the props has lost some conditioning, what's the story there? Oh, don't worry, he had a virus for a couple of weeks. So he's dropped a couple of kgs. It's nothing to worry about. It's all in hand. The doc's over it. And the S&C staff tapered his training back. And look, he's going to get limited minutes maybe the next couple of weeks if they don't need him at the end of the game. If that makes sense. So those type of conversations are continually going on. Again, the strength of our organisation, and even, to be honest, a centrally contracted player model, where you can actually share information knowing that the care of the athlete is what's at the centre of all the conversations. And, I mean, the media will know more from that player's social media posts than often we will as a group. So Joe might go, I noticed that he took a shot at himself outside his GP practice this week. Oh, I wonder why that is. He's lost 2 kg. So you can see where the conversations can kind of take you. And so
players have been doing posts from their hospital beds, Pete? That's how much of an insight they've given to their lives now.
We can sit around and go, how's David Havili going on? He's had surgery. Has he? Sure, I didn't realise that. Oh, no. He posted it yesterday. He had abdominal surgery. Oh, really? Wow. I better ring the physio for status. But, you can see that it's certainly not, I think it's important to work out, and if you look at leadership models around the planet, going away from the cold command and control, overseeing, this is what you need to do to be this and all the rest of it, is not gone in good organisations in regards to even preparing an athlete to return to play. So often we don't have enough conversations about the play, like, how are you travelling? Like, how do you feel? Do you think the program's helping you? Like, what do you need to do? Like, oh, I'm a bit worried because I've heard, Fiki wants us to have better feet this year and I'm not getting a chance to do any of that because, that's just a conversation then, and so that's the type of thing. It's a matter of connecting people. We have some oversight. How long are they going to take to come back? We've got great coaches in Super Rugby. They'll make really good decisions. And I think the thing is, that's why, we rely on our players think for themselves, which is still a strength of the game, I think, because we still have our community is the foundation of our performance program. We have people coaching, in the old barefoot analogy and frosty mornings in New Zealand that make All Blacks. Like the All Blacks don't make All Blacks. We take the quality souls that come through and help guide them to play at this level of the arena, So that's it. So I think, we have an oversight, but we certainly don't. And we have standards and we test standards through the year. And over a 10-year career, they get there eventually. But we can't expect them to be there when they're 21. They might work out how to be an athlete when they're 31, which is normally the outcome. They start coaching themselves eventually, probably, I don't know, Greg, around about the age of 31. There you go.
Yeah. There's a lot to take in around the professional athlete, like, even to a point where I look back in my career and there's so many things I'd love to change, like positively, obviously, and constructively. But that's just the evolution, isn't it, of everything and how science comes in and what Pete's saying, all that support that Pete and our management provide the players,
So this one from Mike. After the ARU and Israel Folau made headlines last year, has New Zealand Rugby worked with more players in terms of the way they interact on social media?
We've always done that, and that I suppose the Israel situation shone the light on how something which can be deemed by a player to be, innocuous or kind of supportive or just speaking his mind on whatever the issue may be, can then spiral into a situation that Australia ended up in. So our players are, like to Pete's point, they live in the community. They're aware of their responsibilities as All Blacks. They know they have, even though they don't see themselves as role models, really, they just see themselves as sons and fathers and rugby players and teammates and just a normal member of society. They recognise the position that the jersey gives them, and with that the responsibility. So don't get me wrong, they're going to make mistakes like anyone would, any young person would. It's just the fact that there's going to be 500,000 people following them online who will then kind of, if it's deemed to be kind of like worthy of being upset about, then they'll make a song and dance, and our players will kind of, it's a constant. But you put yourself out there, you kind of like accept that it's a two-way relationship. Social media, a lot of the players actively, some don't, but a lot of them actively engage with their followers, and so they are kind of constantly getting feedback on whether or not they think something is right or wrong, or you shouldn't have said that, and some, as we all know, context is a big thing, and context can get lost in a lot of situations, and people have differing points of view, which is actually a good thing. I think that the fact that we have a whole bunch of people debating kind of the pros and cons of players and games and game plans and selections is actually a good thing. Coaches might think that they'd love the whole world to kind of just agree with everything that they do, but the passion that comes through New Zealanders and other rugby countries is actually good for the game. A dissenting voice on an issue is actually good, because it forces you to kind of like think that maybe actually I could actually do something a little bit different. So I'm a big believer that actually, talkback gets a little bit of stick, I suppose, from Kiwis as kind of ill-informed, but I think it's great. It's the opinion of the man in the street or who's a follower and passionate kind of rugby fan is just as important as a CEO of a rugby organisation, I think. But when it comes to, back to the original question, when it comes to social media, they are acutely aware of the importance that their words have, the optics around any post that they may put up, and so they try really hard to kind of do the right thing. And I think in the main, New Zealand rugby fans will kind of probably agree that our players are pretty respectable, well brought up kind of young men, but they do recognise as well, as you'll see with some of our players who have kind of got into trouble with kind of, eating McDonald's late at night and going to the wrong flat type thing, that some of them will make mistakes, and that's okay as well. Because I think in the main, New Zealanders are pretty fair and pretty balanced kind of people, and they'll weigh up all the pros and cons, despite some media might actually hone in on the negative side of things. Most Kiwis can think for themselves and are pretty fair and balanced when it comes to weighing up whether or not something is really that bad. So the players are aware of their responsibility when it comes to social media, but like I said, they're just normal young men who will sometimes make mistakes as well.
Look, I'm conscious it's been kind of 40 minutes or so. How does this campaign, this is a question for all of
Warren,
you.
I know it's a long time, but Fiki's been going on for ages now. So if you want to just throw some questions to me and Pete, and then, because Fiki will talk for the whole hour if you let him. So
I'm sure he will.
My flag fell asleep listening to Joe.
Let's chuck a couple of questions to the group. How does this campaign feel compared to other years? And do you feel that the management team are using technology a lot more to maintain the bond? So you guys are in a unique position compared to previous tenures. Yeah, does the beginning of this campaign, this 4-year cycle, feel really different to you guys?
Well, we don't know what it's going to look like for a start,
Yep.
but that's just our new normal. So I think we're just getting ready to hit the ground running when we eventually do. When between various levels and borders opening, we'll have, you know, in the next few weeks and over the next kind of wee while, we'll have an understanding of what actually we're going to be doing. And so once we know that, then we'll just click into gear. But all three of us and the rest of our management team have been doing a lot of planning around when that eventuality happens. So, but what it looks like and who our opposition is, and you know, is still up in the air. But I'd imagine that Fiki and his coaches are spending a lot of time analysing all our opposition, whoever they may be, Fiki?
Yeah, no, we've been chipping away, and we would have still been preparing and doing all that now, regardless of the changes that are obviously going to start happening. And so it's been business as usual in some ways, but every day's been different as well. So I'd say, you know, Pete and Fozzie and Joe are probably better to say whether it's different from last campaigns, because I wasn't here, but it definitely feels so much different. And talking to other coaches around the world in the last few weeks as well, and liaising with people, yeah, it's a different landscape. So, and that's part of I suppose, everyone listening to this as well. Everyone's trying to be as dynamic and flexible and prepared as we can be for whatever is going to happen for us in all our different industries. And I know there's a lot of crossovers between sport and business and things like that. So I suppose that's where hopefully these relationships we have we can help each other out.
That probably segues into an interesting question. With the Super Rugby season cut short, has the All Blacks management had enough time to spot potential new All Blacks to join the wider team, as we've seen some great new talent coming through? But it's been pretty muted over 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, there's definitely some good young players putting their hands up, and I don't actually know whether I'm in a position to say names or not, to be fair. But you know, like if you
is this a scoop? Are you going to provide All Blacks hospitality with a scoop?
yeah, exactly.
As your media manager, go for it. I think you can go for it.
Yeah, I'll just hit non-record. Hang on.
yeah. But you know, you don't have to be. You know, if you're watching the games and you're watching how the Blues have been going, for instance, you know, they've been pretty successful, and there's been if you take into account Kieran Reid's no longer in the All Blacks, and so there's obviously loose forwards that are in maybe the Blues and the Crusaders, young guys that you know that are starting to show some promise. You know, then you look at Brody Retallick's obviously not here. Then in the backs, you know, there's a few guys moved on there, Ben Smith and that. So, you know, there's positions and there's other guys that hopefully will be building even further into their experience and knowledge and skill sets. So, no, there's definitely some names being bandied about, and that's exciting. And that's New Zealand rugby. Been living in Ireland and watching. Every year you go, oh God, another X Factor. Look at that, you know. And it's exciting, and you actually can't wait to see who the next, you know, whatever position and how good this player could be. I was even watching, you know, the Last Dance the other night, Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls, and just seeing his journey in the first 2 episodes. You know, like you can see players here, the same thing. They just start just blooming into something pretty special.
Yeah. What would you like to achieve during this tenure? And Pete and Joe, probably from your perspective, you've been through a few, and I know it's to win a World Cup, but what's important to you as a coaching group to achieve during your, and let's use a 4-year tenure?
I think the thing is, from the perspective of just being around the team for a while, is knowing that I think, like Ireland had beaten us, England had beaten us in a semi-final. The All Blacks have ridden the wave of many wins over many years. And really, I think this team has to prove itself as one of the management groups. So that's the exciting thing. And the exciting thing is the challenge is genuine, because, we're probably at a point we should be, and we probably are, judged on our last result. And at the same time, we've now rekindled the fire by having a normal kind of rotation of coaching staff and now players coming through. So I think, for people like Joe and I along in the teeth, it's pretty exciting to have people like Greg coming into the environment and bringing new ideas with the context that we really work in a 4-year cycle, and that's about the World Cup. And so the Bledisloe, for example, listening to all the conversations with all the captains, with all the coaches, that is right top of the kind of, ladder. So if we got to play Bledisloes this year, that would be incredibly meaningful. So the thing, and so those type of things get you out of bed in the morning and make you kind of think, actually, we are preparing for really to kind of gain a bit of mana back in the jersey to a certain degree, because the media are very quick, and even players now, to kind of all of a sudden, if you lose respect, then you might lose a competitive edge. So I think maybe just as a group to kind of gain with a different group of faces leading the group in the front office, if you like, with our coaching group, and in the player context with a new captain and all those things, because we've been privileged with all the songs we've had for 100 years in the jersey. Well, let's see what the next group can produce, and that's kind of the exciting thing. So I'd like to think that we win the games that matter, and we do that with the right people, leading the program. So I'm pretty excited, to be honest. I don't know where you're at, Joe, but I don't. In terms of proving, like, you'll be judged by your results, and let's get the right results.
That's right. I agree with Pete. Like, the best thing I look forward to every year is actually the new blood coming through, because it makes our environment different, and they just bring a different energy. And Pete and I would have seen over the. Well, he's been in the team for longer than I, but I've been there 12 years now. Is that it's changed? The young players who come in now are expected, and they're encouraged to kind of like speak their mind from the get-go, and really just get out there and play and put themselves forward, not just as a player, but they're everything. And so we encourage that, and I love that. That's the best thing about our environment, is that actually, and it's not too many players a year, I suppose. Pete, maybe up to less than half a dozen players crack the All Blacks each year, if you kind of go on an average. But this year's different, with obviously Foz in charge and a whole new coaching group with Fiki, Plums, and Brad Moore to come back as well. So yeah, it's just new ideas, new voices, new faces across the breakfast table, different conversations. Just brings a different vibe and a different energy, and keeps everyone on their toes and keeps them young. And like I was talking about in the media space, that the players will come in, like you're getting young men coming in who are completely media savvy. They understand the digital space, they understand what they're about, and so they come in and give me kind of like a real sense of, well, this is a whole different ball game now that we're playing. And so yeah, I always get excited every year when a new squad's named.
Greg, for you, coming in brand new, what do you want your tenure to be?
Well, I think that the standards and the benchmarks that I look at this the All Black team in the last, say, decade anyway, have been probably one of the most successful eras that they've had ever. And I think if that's the benchmark for me for where we're at, then I have to be up there and work and do my job, and my expectations are nothing but trying to emulate that again. And obviously that means being number one in the world, and I think that's probably the sole focus. And to do that, exactly what Pete and Joe said, we need to be winning games. And these boys know the process, I think, of how to do that, and hopefully we can excite them by how we plan things around that and get some good detail on there. But I think end of the day, we all know that that's just something that we're trying to give back to what the supporters and the sponsors are, and the average Kiwi that watches the All Blacks that's what they want from us too. They want to be able to see the All Blacks leading the world. So we know that, and that's why, going back to what Joe said around conversations around what people say to you, you take everything in, but there's only so much you can do. And you listen to people, and I think that's important, and acknowledge it, and we'll do our best to try to get there.
Just growing up to be the All Blacks media manager might not be every kid's dream.
No, that's where you're wrong. I think that's where you're wrong. They wanted to be a physio.
No.
They wanted to be a media guy, and then maybe if they were good enough, they wanted to be an All Black. Yeah.
If he can talk well, he can do it. You see.
Yeah. Hey, look, we've been going over 50 minutes, guys. So it's been most informative. Thanks very much for giving up your time to speak with us today. Go well. Good luck, and hopefully get on the field sooner rather than later.
Thanks.
But thanks for that, Warren. And before we go, I think it's important to acknowledge the thousands of All Black supporters that turn up year in, year out to support the All Blacks. We see your tents and your lounges all around the stadium as we turn up, and like we were saying earlier, that supporter base of New Zealanders, and when we're in New Zealand and around the world, is hugely appreciated. And long may it continue.